Welcome to our deep dive today. We'll be looking at Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life,
Okay.
specifically Chapter 12.
All right.
This one's got a pretty intriguing title. It's Pet a Cat When You Encounter One on the Street.
Interesting.
We're going to take this chapter from your reading list and really unpack it. You know, there's some seriously deep ideas about life suffering and what it means to be human,
Yay.
all kind of stemming from this seemingly simple act.
Yeah. It is fascinating how Peterson uses this everyday encounter, right?
Right.
Like petting a cat to just launch into this really profound philosophical territory.
Yeah,
He really gets you thinking about vulnerability and the nature of being.
absolutely. And he kicks things off with some really personal stories
Yeah.
about his own kids, Michaela and Julian.
Correct.
You know, he recounts some of his son Julian's childhood illnesses,
Uh-huh.
and you can really feel the weight of these experiences as he reflects on how fragile we are,
Yeah.
especially as children.
Right.
I mean, just think about it, right? You're so helpless when you're a kid.
Exactly.
You're completely dependent on others for everything.
It's true, and you're just starting to understand the world
Right.
and all the dangers that come with it.
It's scary stuff.
And it's something that I think as adults we often forget about. We get so caught up in our own lives and our own problems that we lose sight of that childlike wonder.
And that sense of vulnerability.
Exactly.
But Peterson brings it right back to the forefront.
He does.
And he doesn't shy away from it.
No, he really doesn't.
He embraces it.
And what strikes me is how he takes those really intimate moments, right? Those personal stories, and he connects them to this much broader point.
Okay.
He realized that loving his children wasn't hindered by their vulnerability,
Yeah.
but actually amplified by it.
I see.
Recognizing their fragility made them even more precious,
More human.
more human, more worth protecting.
Yeah.
It's powerful stuff, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It really challenges that idea that we need to be strong and invulnerable all the time.
Right. It's like we're supposed to have it all together.
Yeah.
But Peterson is saying that's not the case at all.
In fact, it's the opposite.
It's our vulnerability, our limitations that make us who we are.
And that make us worthy of love and compassion.
Exactly.
And then he goes on to talk about his daughter Michaela's journey with severe juvenile arthritis.
Oh, wow.
He doesn't shy away from the details about her pain,
Yeah.
the emotional toll,
Right.
and the incredible resilience she showed throughout it all.
It's pretty amazing when you think about what she went through.
It is.
Yeah.
And Peterson's honesty about the struggles that he and his wife Tammy faced,
Yeah.
it's really impactful.
Hmm.
As a parent, you can't help but empathize with that feeling of wanting to protect your child from pain,
Right.
even though you know it's an impossible task.
It's impossible to shield them from everything.
It is.
Yeah.
He's acknowledging the limits of human control,
Yeah.
especially when facing chronic illness.
It's a battle that you can't always win.
Yeah. He's right there in the trenches with them, experiencing those sleepless nights.
Yeah. I can only imagine.
That desperate search for effective treatments, the constant fear that her condition would worsen.
It must have been a really tough time for their family.
It sounds like
But
it.
they got through it.
They did. And I found myself wondering, if he's advocating for embracing limitations,
Yeah.
how does that square with the natural desire to fight for a cure?
Right. To alleviate suffering.
Yeah. How do you reconcile those two things?
That's a great question. And it gets to the heart of Peterson's point. I think
Okay.
he's not saying that we shouldn't try to improve things or
Yeah.
help people in need,
Right.
but he's asking us to recognize that limitations are an inherent part of the human experience.
Yeah.
Instead of always seeing them as something to overcome,
Yeah.
he's suggesting that we can find meaning and even strength in those limitations.
So it's not about passivity in the face of suffering,
No, not at all.
but rather finding a different way to approach it.
Exactly. It's about accepting what we cannot control
Okay.
and focusing our energy on what we can. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's a really challenging concept.
It is. It goes against a lot of what we're taught to believe.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're supposed to strive for perfection,
Right. To be the best that we can be.
to never give up.
But that can set us up for disappointment
Yeah,
because we're all going to face limitations at some point.
we are.
It's inevitable.
It's part of being human.
And I think that's what Peterson is trying to get us to see.
Yeah. He's trying to help us find a different way to live, a way that's more accepting, more compassionate, and ultimately more fulfilling.
Yeah. I think that's a really beautiful way to put it.
It's a journey for sure.
It is. But I think it's a journey worth taking.
I agree.
Okay, so we've got this idea that limitations can actually enhance meaning and purpose in our lives.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of wondering how this connects to the social realm.
Okay.
Do our interactions with others, especially in groups, also play into this whole idea of limitations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, Peterson dives into this.
He talks about the psychological concept of minimal group identification.
Minimal group identification.
Yeah. Basically, it means we're naturally inclined to form groups,
Uh-huh.
based even on the smallest shared traits.
Yep.
It's like that classic experiment where people are randomly assigned to groups
Yeah, yeah. I've heard of that.
based on something completely trivial.
Right, like what color shirt they're wearing or something.
Exactly. Like whether they overestimate or underestimate the number of dots on a screen.
Okay.
And even then, they start favoring their own group.
Wow, that's fascinating.
It's like this inherent bias we have.
So even when the groups are totally arbitrary,
Partly arbitrary.
we still find ways to differentiate ourselves.
And Peterson suggests this tendency might be an evolutionary adaptation.
Okay, how so?
Well, back in the day, it probably helped our ancestors survive and thrive within their social structures.
Like strength in numbers kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you're part of a group, you're more likely to have support,
Right.
protection, resources.
Makes sense.
So it's kind of ingrained in us.
Wow. So on the one hand, it makes sense that we'd gravitate towards people who are like us,
Right.
who share our values and beliefs, even if those commonalities are pretty minor.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's easy to see how this could lead to, like, us versus them thinking,
Absolutely.
drawing lines and excluding those who don't fit in with our chosen group.
It's a slippery slope.
It is.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about the complexities of social dynamics.
It does.
How do we balance that natural desire for belonging
Yeah.
with the need for inclusivity and understanding?
That is the million-dollar question.
It is. It's a question that's plagued humanity for centuries.
I don't think Peterson claims to have all the answers, but
Mhm.
by highlighting this complexity,
Yeah.
he's encouraging us to be more aware
Oh,
of
cool.
our own biases
I see.
and to actively work towards a more compassionate and inclusive world.
So it's about acknowledging those limitations,
It's so
not just
right.
as individuals, but also as members of social groups.
Right. And using that awareness to build bridges rather than walls.
I like that. Build bridges rather than walls.
It's a powerful image.
It is. And, thinking about it, that connects really well with the image of petting a cat on the street.
How so?
Well, you're encountering a creature that's fundamentally different from you.
Right.
Yet there's this moment of shared connection,
Yeah.
this recognition
Yeah.
of something beyond those differences.
It's about finding those points of intersection.
Exactly. Despite our limitations.
I love that.
Me too. It makes me wonder if part of what Peterson is advocating for is a shift in perspective.
Okay.
A way of looking at limitations not as obstacles,
Yeah.
but as opportunities for growth and connection.
I think you're right on the money with that one.
Okay, good.
And it's not just a theoretical concept. It's
Yeah.
something he demonstrates through his own experiences.
Right.
Remember those heartbreaking stories about his daughter, Michaela?
Yeah, with the arthritis.
Yeah, he was confronting his own limitations as a father.
Yeah. Right. His inability to shield her from pain.
Exactly.
Yeah, those moments were so raw and honest.
They were.
You could really feel the depth of his love for her
And the frustration.
and the immense frustration of not being able to fix everything.
Yeah, he even talked about having to bribe her to do her own injections.
Oh, wow.
Because she was in so much pain.
I can only imagine how difficult that must have been.
For both of them.
Yeah.
And through those challenges,
Yeah.
he's reflecting on the broader human experience,
So,
the ways in which we all face limitations,
Right.
and the importance of finding ways to navigate them.
so it's not about pretending that suffering doesn't exist,
No, not at all.
but it's also not about giving into despair.
Right. It's about finding meaning and purpose, even in the midst of those struggles.
It's like he's walking this tightrope
Okay.
between acknowledging the very real pain and hardship of life
Yeah.
and also finding those glimmers of hope,
Right.
those moments of beauty and connection that make it all worthwhile.
It's a delicate balance.
It is. And, speaking of finding those glimmers of hope,
Yeah.
Peterson actually offers some really practical advice
He does.
for navigating those difficult times.
Like what?
Well, he emphasizes the importance of setting aside dedicated time to think about problems
Okay.
rather than letting them consume you 24/7.
That's good advice.
It is. He also talks about focusing on what you can control
Right.
instead of getting bogged down by the things you can't.
It's about taking back some of that agency.
Exactly. And I remember him suggesting that we try to shift our perspective on time,
Oh,
to focus on the present moment
Yeah.
rather than dwelling on the past or worrying about the future.
Be here now.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems like he's saying, okay, this is really hard, but here are some tangible things we can do to help ourselves get through it.
I like that. He's giving us tools.
He is. And it's not just abstract advice either.
Right.
He's drawing on his own experiences, his own struggles.
Just offer a roadmap.
Exactly. A roadmap for others facing similar challenges.
It's about finding ways to manage suffering,
Yeah.
to find moments of peace and joy.
Even when life feels overwhelming.
Exactly.
It sounds like he's encouraging a kind of mindful approach to facing difficulty.
Yeah, you could definitely say that.
Okay.
It's about being present in the moment,
Uh-huh.
acknowledging the difficulty without letting it define you,
Right.
and seeking out those things that bring you joy and connection.
Okay.
Remember his analogy of the wheel?
The wheel.
Yeah, how the emptiness of the hub
Yeah.
is what gives the wheel its utility.
Yes. He was referencing the Tao Te Ching, wasn't he?
He was, and it beautifully illustrates his point.
How so?
Well, those limitations,
Uh-huh.
those empty spaces,
Yeah.
are actually what give things their purpose and function.
It's a complete mind shift.
It is.
You know, seeing limitations as integral parts of the
Right.
necessary for beauty, for growth.
For the very possibility of meaning itself.
So in a sense, by acknowledging and accepting our limitations,
Yeah.
we're actually opening ourselves up to a richer, more meaningful experience of life.
Precisely. And that brings us back to the cat.
I was wondering when we'd circle back to that,
Right.
how does petting a cat tie into all of this?
Well, remember how we contrasted dogs,
Yeah.
representing the familiar and domesticated,
Right.
with cats who embody the untamed and unpredictable nature of being?
I do.
Yeah.
It seemed like a curious comparison at first,
Right.
but I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
Okay, good. The act of petting a cat,
Okay.
this simple, seemingly insignificant act,
Yeah.
becomes a metaphor for our ability to find joy and meaning,
Okay.
even in the most unexpected places.
Even in the face of suffering and limitation.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even when things are tough,
Yeah.
there's still so much to appreciate,
To marvel at.
to marvel at, to connect with,
It's about embracing the mystery and wonder of existence.
even in its messy and unpredictable forms.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yes.
It's like those moments of serendipity that can completely shift your perspective.
Even for a brief moment.
Yeah. Peterson talked about those little things,
How
you know,
about the things?
like seeing a child dancing,
Oh, okay.
enjoying a great cup of coffee,
Yeah,
even watching a Simpsons episode at 1.5x speed.
I love that.
Me too.
It's the simple things.
It is. It's about tuning in to those tiny joys
Exactly.
that remind us that even when things are tough, there's still beauty and wonder to be found in the world.
And it's a choice.
It is.
We have to choose to see it.
So it's not about denying the darkness
No.
or pretending that suffering doesn't exist,
Right.
but rather choosing to find those glimmers of light,
Yeah,
those moments of connection that remind us of the inherent goodness of being alive.
exactly. And that's the core of what Peterson is driving at in this chapter. He's
Mhm.
offering us a different way to approach life,
Uh-huh.
a way that acknowledges both the darkness and the light,
Right.
the limitations and the possibilities.
This has been such an insightful exploration of this chapter so far.
It has.
I'm eager to hear what final thoughts you have for our listener as we wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah.
We started this deep dive with something that seems so simple. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street.
Right.
But we've really gone deep, haven't we?
We have. This chapter's got a lot to unpack.
It does. It's like this whole tapestry of ideas about vulnerability,
Limitations.
meaning suffering. It's all connected.
Yeah. And it's amazing how Peterson brings it all together. You know, he's got these personal stories and philosophical insights,
Right.
ancient wisdom. It's all woven in there.
And he makes a pretty compelling case for embracing our limitations.
He does. You know, instead of seeing limitations as weaknesses.
Right. Like something to overcome.
Yeah, he's saying they're an integral part of being human.
And even a source of meaning and connection.
Exactly.
And he does this all while acknowledging the reality of pain and suffering.
Yeah, he's not sugarcoating anything.
No, he's not saying that life is easy,
But he's also not giving in to despair.
right? It's like he's finding this balance,
A middle path.
yeah, between the darkness and the light.
It's about finding those glimmers of hope
Those moments of beauty and grace,
that remind us that life is still worth living.
even with all its imperfections.
Exactly.
It's like he's saying that by acknowledging our limitations,
Yeah.
by accepting that we don't have all the answers,
Right.
we open ourselves up to a richer experience.
A more meaningful life.
And that's where the cat comes in.
Full circle.
It is. How does petting a cat tie into all of this?
Well, you know how Peterson contrasts dogs and cats?
Yeah, dogs representing the familiar.
The domesticated.
and cats symbolizing the untamed, the unpredictable,
Right, the wildness of being.
and the act of petting a cat becomes this powerful metaphor.
It's a reminder that joy and wonder can be found in the most unexpected places.
Even amidst the chaos and uncertainty,
Yeah, even when things are tough.
it's about embracing the mystery
The
and
unknown.
finding those moments of connection.
That transcend our differences.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I'm left with this question.
What's that?
What are our cats?
Our cats.
What are those things, those unexpected sources of joy and connection,
That remind us of the beauty in the world.
even on the tough days?
It's a great question. It's something for all of us to ponder.
It is. What are those small things, those moments of grace?
That help us reconnect with the wonder of being alive.
Maybe it's a beautiful sunset,
Yeah.
a kind gesture from a stranger.
The feeling of the sun on your face.
Whatever it is,
I encourage you to seek out those cats.
cherish those moments.
They're what make life worth living.
This deep dive has been a good reminder
Of what?
that even amidst all the complexities and challenges,
Yeah.
there's always something to appreciate,
To learn.
to connect with,
It's about choosing to see the world with open eyes
embracing our limitations.
and finding those sparks of joy.
So until next time, fellow deep divers,
Keep exploring
keep questioning.
and keep petting those cats.
See you next time.